Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. My name is Finn, and today we're talking about traveling with your drone. We're going to talk about a couple of considerations, a couple aspects when you're traveling with your drone. We're going to talk about local travel, so travel maybe within your own city, your own province, your own local area. We're going to talk about traveling on a plane within Canada. We're going to talk about some of the regulations and requirements when traveling outside of Canada. And we'll go through a couple of best practices for your drone when you're going to other places. The first thing we're going to talk about are some of the considerations if you're traveling locally with your drone. And when we say locally, we mean like you're driving within your province, maybe to the next province over, maybe you're driving to your local area, but this is within your own, without necessarily needing an airplane ticket. One of the things that you always want to make sure is that your aircraft has adequate protection. The Fly More kits for DJI do come with bags that do protect the aircraft. The other thing you can look for if you're finding that there's not quite enough space in a bag like this is you can purchase something like a Pelican case. Normally you can get cutouts for specific aircrafts, and when I say cutouts, I mean like the foam that goes in the Pelican case. Or the one that we use are camera bags, so bags that are traditionally designed for photography cameras actually fit drones fairly well. You know, a Mini 4 Pro is about the size of a camera body when it's all folded up. So actually you can use a padded camera bag to protect your aircraft. And the advantage of the camera bags is that they can store more stuff. So you can put things like SD card wallets and ND filter sets or a power bank or even a laptop or multiple aircraft, multiple batteries. So you can fit more stuff in that than the case that the DJI Fly More kits normally come with. The other thing you want to do is, if you are flying FPV, is make sure you have a appropriate bag for your lithium polymer batteries. We've talked about lipos in the past. We've talked about the dangers of lipos in the past and how they can catch fire. And having a bag like this could potentially, I don't know, if you've got it in the trunk of your car and for some reason they catch fire, it will potentially save your car from ending up like a Ford Pinto. And some of the best practices when you're chucking the drone in your car is you want to keep it out of direct sunlight. So if you're leaving it in the car, leave it in the trunk, not in the cabin of the vehicle. Like any electronics, you never want to leave it in the cabin of the vehicle. They'll get really, really warm, and also they'll get stolen. Keep it in a place that is easily accessible and packed firmly. So again, you want it in a nice bag that's padded, and then you want it somewhere where you can access it easily. And always remember to bring spares, SD cards, propellers, batteries. If you're driving into the bush and flying legally in the bush, if you're driving somewhere that is not a built-up area, you're not going to be able to find an SD card or a battery in that area. So you want to make sure you have extras and spares of everything in case something goes wrong. Now, let's say that you want to go to the other side of the country. You want to travel on a plane with your batteries. The good rules of thumb for when you're traveling is to make sure you have prints out and digital copies of your paperwork in case something gets lost in the shuffle. You want to make sure you're checking NavDrone ahead of time. Like, let's say that I want to travel to like Montreal or Toronto and fly in a specific area. If you're just a basic pilot, you really want to make sure that that the area that you're looking to fly is suitable for basic operations. If you're an advanced pilot, you might want to check to see if there's any restricted areas where you would potentially need extra permission, or an SFOC if required if you were traveling for work. And remember to be courteous of other people around you. Remember, these aircraft, especially if you got like an FPV, they can be kind of noisy, kind of a nuisance. If you're at like a place that is, has a lot of natural beauty, it's very quiet, very peaceful, very serene, having someone fly one of these with the propellers whirring, is going to adversely affect their enjoyment of the area. So you just want to make sure that you're being courteous of other people. You also have to be aware what type of batteries your drone has, because there is a limit to the size of the battery that you can carry on an airplane. Now, most of these batteries are good to go on an airplane as long as, we talked about this in our battery episode, but these batteries are good to go on an airplane as long as they are in your carry-on. For most of these types of batteries, you would need to get permission from the airline in order to check them, so put them in the cargo hold of the airplane. In general, it is a better idea to just keep these in your carry-on. If these batteries were to catch fire, if they catch fire in the cabin, there are people, the flight attendants have equipment in order to deal with lipo fires, there is no one in the cargo hold. So if there's a fire in the cargo hold, there is no one that will be able to fight that fire, and the aircraft would probably have to land immediately, whether that aircraft is whole or not. If there's a big fire in the cargo area, who knows? Do not carry a damaged battery. In our battery episode, we talked about if these batteries are allowed to get punctured or damaged, that's how they explode. And make sure your batteries are packed securely. Keeping them in the case like this that they come in is a great way of making sure that they are packed securely. Keep the batteries unplugged, and make sure that, like normally when you go through security, you put this through security, they're going to see the batteries. They will most likely ask you about them, and then you can say, these are the batteries for my drone. They are good to go on the flight because they are under, I think it's 100 milliamp hours. Oh, sorry, it was watt hours, not milliamp hours, pardon me. The drone itself, these are normally good to go on the aircraft because they're just considered a small electronic like a camera or a laptop or something like that. The big thing is the batteries. So there are some types of drone, if the batteries are a certain size, then they cannot be put on the aircraft. So an example would be the Matrice 300. The big batteries in the Matrice 300 are too large to fly commercial. So that's why if you're traveling with a Matrice, you either have to drive it there yourself, send the batteries via UPS or FedEx or something like that by courier, or rent batteries at the location, which is why some drone retailers actually rent out batteries for Matrices and stuff like that because they actually can't fly commercially. When you're packing spare batteries, if you have any concerns, please check with your airline. They will be able to tell you exactly what can or cannot fly on their aircraft. It's better to do this before you're at the airport. Remember, like, air travel is stressful. I don't know the last time you went air travel, Cam, but the last time I went, I got some stuff confiscated, and I was really annoyed about it. And so the best way to prevent that from happening is to just be well prepared, check in advance. Make sure each battery is in a protective case so they don't get damaged. Prevent crushing, puncturing, or putting pressure on the battery. So even to that end, I used to work as a flight attendant, and we would tell people, if there's something delicate, don't put it in the overhead bin because people might put stuff on top of that. Things that are delicate should always go underneath the seat in front of you. Yes, this is from EASA, which is the Canadian Air Travel Safety Authority. Basically, this is the organization that does security checks at Canadian airports and assures safety on Canadian air travel. This is what Air Canada has to say about these kinds of things. The acceptance and packaging rules apply to spare batteries, spare cells or battery packs used for camera equipment, drones, power tools, etc. All cells and battery packs must be individually protected to prevent short circuits. Exposed terminals can be taped over. Individual cells or battery packs can be in their original retail packaging or stored in a protective pouch in case or a separate plastic bag. Each passenger may bring a maximum quantity as per carry-on limits. So, if you've got some of these, if you've got FPV batteries which have potentially exposed wires, it is a best practice to just tape over the contacts on that so nothing touches anything else. Basically, you want to use utmost caution when bringing spare batteries on commercial aircraft. Fire on board an aircraft is bad. So lithium-ion cell battery packs with a rating of less than 100 watt hours are permitted in carry-on bags. You can keep them in the device or as a spare. If the cells are removed from the device and carried on board, the device can remain inside the checked baggage. If it's above 100 but not above 160, you can bring one that is installed on the device and a maximum of two protected spare lipos, which can be in your carry-on baggage pending approval by an Air Canada airport agent. So they might look at how you've packed that battery, and they might tell you that it's either packed well enough to go on the aircraft or not, but you can only bring two outside of the device. So if you had 3 batteries, you could keep one in the drone and then have the 2 others packed, but they have to be packed properly. Lead acid batteries, those are car batteries. Here's the scoop about traveling outside of Canada. This is something that we get asked fairly regularly. Is there an internationally recognized drone certificate or license? There is not an internationally recognized drone certificate or license. If you are traveling to multiple jurisdictions, you need to be certified in every jurisdiction. Anywhere you travel, you need to check the local laws. There's no international drone pilot certificate. So check in with the organization, so something like the FAA or EASA, to obtain the required licenses and register your drone if required. So I've pulled up some of the rules for some of the common holiday destinations. These rules are not. I just kind of looked at the various organizations' websites and just saw kind of what the gist of the rules were. If you're looking at traveling to these places, you need to go onto their websites and get more detailed information about it. And these rules are subject to change. These rules are, this is 10:17 Pacific Daylight Time on August 14th, 2024. If they could have changed since the taping of this episode. If you are outside of Canada, we've talked about the rules in Canada pretty extensively. We have videos on basic operations, advanced operations. What are the regulatory requirements for these? If you're looking at traveling to Canada, just make sure that you are registering your aircraft. If the drone is over 250 grams, register your aircraft and obtain a pilot certificate, either basic or advanced. If you are in controlled airspace, you need to request permission, and you need to complete a site survey prior to every flight to satisfy the regulatory requirements. There are more regulatory requirements for flying in Canada, but this is kind of the framework of the Canadian regulatory requirements. Now, what is it if you are traveling to the United States? Depending on the weight of the aircraft, you need to register your aircraft. And then you either need to obtain a trust certificate for recreational flying or a Part 107 certificate for commercial flying. Now, when I say commercial flying, this could be even something like YouTube. If you are posting the photos or videos on YouTube, you may need a Part 107 certificate. I would recommend going onto the FAA website. They actually have a what type of drone certificate do I need tool to help you determine. But you at minimum need a trust or a Part 107 certificate. Also in the United States, your aircraft needs to be compliant with remote ID regulations. The European Union. So in the European Union, there is a couple of levels of drone certificate and a couple of different categories of drones. These categories of drones refer to the weight of the drone. You need to register your aircraft with the EU, and then you need to obtain the appropriate certificate. So an A1 or an A3 for an aircraft that's 0 to 900 grams, and an A2 if it's above 900 grams up to 4 kilograms. One of the interesting things about the EU is that each country can have specific regulations on top of the EASA's drone regulations. So you need to follow the local regulations country to country, and they actually can change country to country. So for example, in some parts of the EU, it is permissible to fly your drone at night. In the Netherlands, it is impermissible to fly your drone at night. So you need to be aware of the country to country regulations that will apply to your operation. Also in the EU, the aircraft needs to be remote ID compliant. The United Kingdom is different because of Brexit. For the United Kingdom, you need to pass a test and obtain either a flyer ID or an operator ID. You can kind of think about it like this. Flyer is only person at the controls, but operator is someone who is in charge of the aircraft. This is the person who is registering the aircraft, completing maintenance and logging flights. So if you're traveling on your own, you are most likely an operator and would need to get an operator certificate. You then need to register the aircraft and then comply with their laws, so things like altitude restrictions and distance from people. This is the same for every place. You need to comply with the local regulations in regards to altitudes, airspaces, distance from people, these kinds of things. And then finally in Japan, you need to register your aircraft. If you're in certain areas, you need to get permission to fly. From what I could tell, it was similar to Canada, built up areas near airports, controlled airspace, that sort of thing. And then again, comply with other local drone restrictions, distance from bystanders, altitude restrictions, distance from built up areas. But for Japan, it's just a registration process for this. A couple other ones that I can think of off the top of my head, I didn't make a slide for this, but for Singapore, you also need to register your aircraft and then request permission to fly if you're in certain areas. There are extensive no-fly zones in Singapore around tourist attractions like Marina Bay and the Marina Barrage. There's also a lot of Singapore is pretty small, but they've got like 7 military airports, so you can't fly near those military airports. So just make sure you're following the local laws. Basically, the takeaway from this, no matter where you're going, you need to check to see if there are local drone laws. Not every country has local drone laws, but if they do, you need to be in compliance with them. Showing up to a beach in Mexico, flying your drone, and then when someone comes and hassles you, showing them your Canadian pilot certificate is not going to cut it. So we've got this video here from, this is the European Union safety about traveling with your drone. So we'll just...
What are the most important things you need to know when traveling with your drone to EASA country? Hi, my name is Tom Strojnik and I'm a professional filmmaker and drone pilot from Slovenia. I do travel quite often for filmmaking projects, and traveling with drones is actually easy if you follow a few simple tips. The first one, of course, is to fly legally. If you want to operate your drone in an EASA country, you need to register as a drone operator with the National Aviation Authority of the first EASA country you intend to operate from, and you need to get your drone pilot license. Once these formalities are done, they are valid across the rest of EASA countries. You don't need to register again in another EASA country you go to. Okay, let's now talk about how to pack gear. It is possible to leave your drone without the batteries in the check-in baggage, but make sure it's really switched off and protected from unintentional activation. Anyway, batteries are not allowed in the check-in baggage. All batteries need to be with you in the carry-on. Make sure that the batteries don't exceed 100 watt-hours, because otherwise you may not be able to transport them. Batteries do not necessarily have to be discharged, but it is safer if they are at storage voltage. And use a LipoSafe bag that reduces the chances of damage in case of a fire. Since I often bring a lot of drones with me, what I do is I have 1 or 2 drones with me in the carry-on and the rest are in the check-in baggage. When going through the airport security, I open the LipoSafe bag, so when it goes through the scan they can see what it is. But before I open the bag, I tell the security officer that I have drone batteries with me and that I'm going to open the bag so they can take a closer look if they need to. And this will make your life so much easier, because trust me, all of these jam-packed batteries tend to raise suspicion. Last tip I would give you is regarding your drone repair tools. I put them into the check-in luggage because passengers are not allowed to bring sharp objects on board the plane. Screwdrivers and similar potentially dangerous objects need to go in the check-in luggage, otherwise there is a very high chance that security will take it away during the screening process. Once you arrive at your final destination in Europe, you need of course to comply with the European drone regulations. You don't want to get in trouble by flying in restricted space. Each country has a map of drone geographical zones that you can check. Just avoid flying close to airports, in national parks, around military installations and other similar restricted areas, and you will be fine. There are some more basic notions to follow in the EASA and national authorities' websites. Read the attached article for more detailed information. Thank you for watching this video, and I wish you a safe journey and happy drone flying.
The one other thing I want to mention about the EASA is there are some countries in Europe that are not part of the European Union that are also under the EASA. The ones that come to mind are Norway and Switzerland. These countries are technically not in the EU, but they still follow these drone regulations. Of course, the most different one is the United Kingdom. They just got to be different, you know? And then you need to exercise good etiquette when you do fly. Here are some best practices for when you are traveling to a different place with your drone. Make sure you perform a pre-flight check before you pack your drone. If you haven't flown in a while, make sure to practice your skills, brush up on your skills. Be aware of no drone zones at landmarks. I mentioned in Singapore, a lot of the tourist attractions are actually in a no-fly zone. There are also no-fly zones around a lot of tourist attractions. And you know, personally, I don't even want to fly around a tourist attraction because you're just going to ruin the experience for everybody else. And do not assume you can fly your drone anywhere or in the same types of places as your local area. As we mentioned, drone laws vary country to country to country. Just because in Canada you're allowed to fly in a certain type of, like a, you know, when I say like kind of area, I mean like, oh, you're out in the bush, you can fly there. That doesn't mean that that's the case everywhere. Every country has their own regulations and you need to respect them. Getting busted abroad and then saying that you were unaware of the regulations probably is not gonna work for you. So let's open it up to some questions from the chat here. I'll wait a couple of moments and we shall see if anybody has any burning questions. Oh yeah, so we've got a question from the chat. Are you familiar with the A1, A3 versus A2 categories in Ireland and the EU? So These ones have to do with the weight of the aircraft. And I think also, so the A2 is for heavier drones, and then A1 and A3, I believe, is recreational versus commercial for small drones. So it says that, but that's kind of the gist of the difference. It's a weight category. In the EU, drones are classified based on their weight, and like the types of operations you can do are based on your certification level and the weight of the aircraft. So that's kind of the difference between those types of certificates. I have an A1 certificate and fly DJI Mini. That should suffice. As far as I can, so A1 is up to 900 grams, so the Mini should be within those limits. However, make sure that you double check. I'm not an expert on the European laws, so I would really recommend just going to the EASA website and just making sure that you're good to go. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. If you've liked this content, you can hit the like button. If you really liked it, you can hit the subscribe button if you want to see more live streams like this. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you again on the next episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. Have a great rest of your day.